The tray rattled. Anya Sharma flinched, her hands tightening on the thin metal. A tremor, barely perceptible, ran up her arms. She willed it to stop. A performance. Everything was a performance. The oversized scrubs, a drab seafoam green, hung from her small frame, hiding the dense corded muscle beneath. Her hair, a chaotic brown bun, was deliberately messy. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sky, were perpetually downcast, fixed on the scuffed linoleum of the hospital floor. This was her life now. A quiet life. A life of beeping machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic. A life where the loudest sound was a dropped bedpan, not the concussive roar of a breach. She hated it. She craved it. Sharma! The voice was a scalpel, sharp and contemptuous. Anya's shoulders hunched instinctively, a physical manifestation of the meek persona she wore like a second skin. She turned slowly, the tray of vitals equipment still trembling in her grip. Dr. Alistair Finch stood there, arms crossed over his pristine white coat. He was a man sculpted from arrogance, with a jaw that seemed permanently clenched and eyes that scanned the world for flaws, usually finding them in others. Today, they were fixed on her. "Did you or did you not just take Mr. Henderson's blood pressure?" he asked. His voice was not loud, but it carried, cutting through the low hum of the nurse's station. Heads turned, conversations paused. The Finch show was about to begin. "Yes, doctor," Anya mumbled, her voice a practiced whisper. I did." "And?" He cocked an eyebrow. "Are you going to share the results with the class, or is it classified information?" A few of the junior nurses tittered nervously. Anya felt a familiar cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was the feeling of a scope settling on her position, the feeling of being exposed. She fought it down. This was a different kind of exposure, a harmless kind. 140/90, doctor, she said, her eyes glued to a spot on his expensive Italian shoes. Finch sighed, a theatrical sound of pure exasperation. He snatched the chart from its slot on the wall. 140/90, which is precisely what it was 2 hours ago when a competent nurse took it. However, you seem to have forgotten to note his elevated heart rate, or did the complexity of counting to 100 prove too strenuous for you this morning? The humiliation was a physical thing, a heat that crawled up her neck and burned her cheeks. She willed the blush to come. It was part of the costume. The clumsy, anxious Nurse Sharma would blush. She would stammer. I'm sorry, doctor. I was about to chart it." The lie was flimsy, but it was the expected one. "You were about to." Finch tossed the chart back with a clatter. "The story of your career, Sharma. Always about to, never doing. Go get Mr. Henderson a new water pitcher. Try not to spill it on any critical life support equipment this time." He turned and walked away, his audience dispersing, the brief moment of drama over. Anya stood there, her knuckles white on the edge of the metal tray. The scar on her right forearm, a jagged silver line that ran from her wrist to her elbow, felt cold. It always did. A phantom chill from a desert night long ago. Old habit, old discipline. She forced her hands to relax. She took a slow, measured breath, the kind they taught you for calming the sniper's twitch, not for enduring a surgeon's scorn. Inhale through the nose. Hold for 4. Exhale through the mouth. The rage, a white-hot thing that lived coiled in her gut, receded. It did not vanish. It never vanished. It just went back into its cage. She was Anya Sharma, RN, a clumsy, forgetful, barely competent nurse. She was not Ghostbird. Ghostbird was dead, buried under 6 feet of redacted files and a flag folded with military precision. Ghostbird wouldn't have tolerated a man like Finch for a single second. Ghostbird would have seen the subtle tells in his posture, the slight shift of weight to his left leg, the way his carotid artery pulsed when he was agitated, and cataloged them as weaknesses. But Anya Sharma saw nothing. She was just a nurse, a bad one. She put the tray down, her movements deliberately uncertain. She fetched the water pitcher. As she passed the nurse's station, she caught the eye of Elena Petrova. Elena was an older nurse, with kind eyes that saw too much and a stern mouth that said too little. She'd been a combat medic in the First Gulf War. She didn't laugh at Finch's jokes. She just watched Anya with a look that was part pity, part confusion. Don't let him get to you, Elena said, her voice low. His ego is more inflamed than most of our patients' appendices. Anya gave a weak, watery smile. I should have remembered the pulse, she said, playing her part. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. You're a strange one, Anya. Your hands shake when you hold a coffee cup, but I've seen you thread an IV into the rolling vein on a dehydrated junkie like you were born to do it. You drop charts, but you never miss a change in a patient's breathing. Anya's blood went cold. Observation. Details. Elena saw details. That was dangerous. Just lucky sometimes, I guess, Anya stammered, fumbling with the plastic pitcher. She turned and hurried away before Elena could say more. The hospital was a grid. Corridors like streets, rooms like buildings. She understood grids. She moved through the day with a forced clumsiness, a constant draining performance. Dropping a syringe here, fumbling a chart there, apologizing, always apologizing. It was a kind of camouflage. The best place to hide a predator is in a flock of sheep. The best way to hide a warrior was to pretend to be a victim. And Finch made it so easy. He was her unwitting partner in this deception. Every insult, every public dressing down, cemented her cover. He thought he was breaking her. He was building her cage, bar by gilded bar. He had no idea what lived inside it. She spent the rest of the morning in a haze of routine tasks, each one a small battle against her own muscle memory. Her hands wanted to move with an economy and speed that would be terrifyingly out of place. When she changed a dressing, her fingers instinctively assessed the tissue with a field surgeon's precision. She had to force them to be slower, less certain. When she walked, she had to consciously break the silent, measured tread of an operator, adopting a shuffling, hurried gait that matched her persona. The effort was immense. It was more exhausting than a 36-hour reconnaissance mission. In the field, the enemy was external. Here, in the quiet, sterile halls of St. Jude's, the enemy was herself, her own instincts, her own training, the ghost of the woman she used to be. She checked on Mr. Henderson, an elderly man with a failing heart and a kind smile. He didn't seem to mind her supposed incompetence. He just liked that she took the time to listen to his stories about the war. The second one. Not her war. A different kind of war, but the same kind of ghosts. You're a good kid, he'd wheezed, patting her hand. His touch was dry and papery. Just need more confidence. Confidence. She had enough confidence to field strip a Sig Sauer in the dark, under fire. She had enough confidence to call in an airstrike on her own position because it was the only way out. What she didn't have was the right to show it. Lunch was a solitary affair in a corner of the bustling cafeteria. She ate quickly, methodically, scanning the room without seeming to. Old habit, old discipline, assess the exits, clock the personnel, note the anomalies. A security guard, new on the job, his posture too rigid. A kitchen worker with a tremor in his hand that wasn't from fatigue. Details. Always details. Her mind was a targeting system that could not be switched off. She felt a presence and looked up. Dr. Finch was standing over her table, a tray in his hands, a sneer on his face. Don't you have a friend to eat with, Sharma? He asked, his voice dripping with condescending pity. Or do they all find you as tedious as I do? Anya stared at her half-eaten sandwich. I'm fine, doctor. Of course you are. He sat down opposite her uninvited. The small table suddenly felt like an interrogation cell. I've been reviewing your file. Your references are adequate. Your performance since joining us has been less than adequate. I'm beginning to wonder if we made a mistake hiring you. Her heart rate remained steady. 60 beats per minute, the resting rate of a predator. She feigned a nervous flutter of her eyelids. I'm trying my best, doctor. Your best is objectively terrible, he said, not with anger, but with a calm, dissecting cruelty. I watch you. You move like you're afraid of your own shadow. You hesitate. In our profession, hesitation kills people. You are a liability, Nurse Sharma, a walking, talking, chart-dropping liability. Each word was a small, sharp stone. She let them hit her. She let them build the wall of her cover higher and stronger. This was necessary. This humiliation was the price of her peace, the price of her anonymity. She looked up, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second, letting him see the flicker of hurt she manufactured there. I'll try harder. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Don't bother. Just try not to kill anyone before I can have you transferred to a less critical department. Pediatrics, perhaps. The children might find your clumsiness endearing. He stood up and walked away, leaving his words hanging in the air. Anya looked down at her hands. The tremor was back, but this time it wasn't feigned. The cage was rattling. The thing inside was awake and angry. Control. The word echoed in her mind. It was her old commander's voice, a gravelly baritone that had guided her through hell and back. Control your weapon. Control your breathing. Control your fear. She finished her sandwich, the food tasteless in her mouth. She cleared her tray and walked back to the ward. The performance had to go on. She was Anya Sharma, and Anya Sharma was weak. She was harmless. She was nobody. That was the lie she had to live, until the sky broke open. It started with a sound, a low, rhythmic thumping that grew steadily louder, vibrating through the windows of the hospital. It was a sound that belonged to another world, another life. The sound of rotor blades beating the air into submission. Anya froze in the middle of the hallway, a stack of clean linen in her arms. Her head snapped up, her eyes instinctively tracking the sound. A Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk, heavy military grade, flying low and fast, not a medivac. This was different. This was an insertion. Nurses and doctors crowded the windows, pointing and murmuring. Anya backed away, melting into the shadows of an alcove. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't want to be recognized. The helicopter didn't land on the designated rooftop helipad. It hovered, impossibly steady, over the emergency ambulance bay, its downdraft whipping trees and scattering loose debris. Elite soldiers, clad in black tactical gear and armed with weapons that had no place in a civilian hospital, rappelled down with fluid, terrifying grace. They formed a perimeter, their movements economical and precise. They were pros, the kind of men she used to command. A stretcher was lowered from the helicopter. On it, a man. Even from this distance, Anya could see the rank on his uniform collar. 4 stars, an admiral. The ER doors burst open. Dr. Finch, looking flustered but important, strode out to meet them, his white coat flapping in the rotor wash. Anya felt the cold dread seep into her bones. Her past was not just knocking on the door, it was blowing the door off its hinges. She had to get out. She had to disappear. But her feet were rooted to the floor. The discipline, the instinct that had kept her alive for a decade, screamed at her. Mission first, threat assessment, protect the asset. The asset was a 4-star admiral, and he was being brought into her hospital. Her quiet life was over. Chaos erupted in the emergency room. The moment the gurney crashed through the doors, the sterile environment of St. Jude's was shattered. The soldiers, a silent, imposing wall of black Kevlar, cleared a path. Doctors and nurses scrambled, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. Anya watched from the doorway of a supply closet, her heart a cold, heavy drum against her ribs. She was supposed to be invisible. She was supposed to be getting a fresh box of gauze. But she couldn't look away. The man on the gurney was large, even lying down. His face was pale, beaded with sweat, his gray hair matted with blood. A field dressing was crudely strapped to his chest, already soaked through with a dark arterial red. But it was his eyes that held her. They were wide, unfocused, staring at the ceiling tiles as if they were a hostile sky. Admiral Marcus Thorne. She recognized him from briefings, a legend in naval special warfare, a man who had planned and overseen some of the most sensitive operations of the last 20 years, operations she had been a part of. "Get him into Trauma 1, now!" Finch was shouting, trying to assert control over a situation that was spiraling away from him. He shoved a junior resident out of the way, grabbing the gurney himself. "I need a full workup. Type and cross, chest x-ray, get me a surgical consult." The soldiers followed, their boots silent on the linoleum. Their leader, a major by his insignia, stood near the door, his eyes scanning everything, his hand never far from the sidearm on his hip. His gaze swept past Anya, dismissing her. Just a timid nurse hiding in a closet. The camouflage was working. Too well. Then Thorne began to scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a roar of pure, undiluted combat rage. His body arched on the gurney, straining against the straps. His eyes, no longer vacant, were now burning with a terrifying fire. Contact front! Contact front! Get down! Ghostbird, where's my fire support? Get me fire support! The name hit Anya like a physical blow. Ghostbird, her name, the name on her tombstone, the name whispered in the dark before a mission, the name she had not heard in 5 years. Her breath hitched. The supply closet felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in. The scar on her arm burned, a searing line of fire. Finch and 2 other doctors were trying to hold Thorne down. He's delirious. Get me 10 of Haldol, now, Finch yelled, his voice strained. Negative on the sedative, the major snapped, stepping forward. The Admiral has a head injury. We don't know how he'll react. I am the doctor in charge here, Finch shot back, his face red with fury and fear. He is a danger to himself and my staff. Thorne thrashed again, his strength phenomenal. He ripped one of the leather restraints from its mooring. His arm swung wildly, catching a young nurse in the jaw and sending her stumbling back with a cry. The situation was degrading, rapidly. Anya's mind, the part she tried so hard to suppress, took over. It analyzed the scene with cold, brutal efficiency. Threat, delirious VIP, physically powerful, combat-trained. Risk, injury to staff, exacerbation of the patient's own injuries. Objective, de-escalate and control. Finch was failing. His approach was confrontational. He was treating the symptom, the violence, not the cause. The cause was in Thorne's head. He wasn't in a hospital. He was back there, back in the fire. Anya knew which fire he meant. The Zagram Pass ambush, the one that had ended her career, the one that had supposedly ended her life. He was reliving the moment her world had burned to the ground. She saw Finch pull a syringe from a nurse's hand. A mistake, a critical error. Sedating a man in that state, with a possible TBI, could kill him. Or worse, it could escalate his fight-or-flight response into a full-blown homicidal rage. She had to act. The decision was not conscious. It was instinct. It was the core of who she was, breaking through 5 years of carefully constructed lies. She stepped out of the supply closet. Her movement was no longer the shuffle of Nurse Sharma. It was the silent, purposeful glide of Ghostbird. She moved through the chaos as if it were a slow-motion dream. She saw the paths, the angles, the spaces between people. Move, she said. The word was not loud. It was not a request. It was a command, spoken in a low, calm tone that vibrated with an authority no one in that room had ever heard from her. It cut through the shouting like a laser. The major turned, his eyes widening in surprise. Finch, syringe in hand, paused, his head cocked as if he'd heard a ghost. Anya didn't wait for them to comply. She slipped past them, her small frame moving with impossible grace. She reached the gurney. Thorne was still shouting, his eyes wild. They're flanking us! We're being overrun! Code Blackbird! I repeat, Code Blackbird! Anya placed her hands gently on the Admiral's shoulders, not to restrain him, but to ground him. Her touch was firm, steady. She leaned in close, her mouth next to his ear, shielding her words from the others. She spoke, her voice a low, rhythmic whisper. It was not the voice of Anya Sharma. It was the voice of a commander in the field. Admiral, stand down. Thorne flinched, but he didn't stop thrashing. She tried again, her voice dropping even lower, using the cadence of a secure radio transmission. Red Falcon, this is Ghostbird. I read you 5 by 5. The sky is clear. I say again, the sky is clear. It was a decommissioned operational code, a phrase that meant mission complete, stand down, you are safe. It was a phrase they had used 100 times, a phrase that was classified at the highest level. The effect was instantaneous. Admiral Thorne went rigid. His thrashing ceased. The roar in his throat died, replaced by a ragged gasp. His eyes, which had been darting around the room, locked onto her face. The wild, delirious fire was gone. In its place was a dawning, disbelieving recognition. Ghost? Bird? He rasped, his voice cracking. They said you were gone. Anya kept her hands on his shoulders. She kept her eyes locked on his. Negative, Admiral, she said, her voice still a low whisper meant only for him. Just went deep. You're safe now. You're in a friendly facility. We'll get you patched up. Thorne's body sagged against the gurney, the fight draining out of him. He stared at her, his eyes searching her face. He saw the scar on her arm, his own eyes filled with a sudden, shocking grief. He knew what that scar meant. He knew where she had gotten it. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since he had arrived, he was still. Anya straightened up and faced the silence. The entire trauma bay was frozen. Every doctor, every nurse, every hardened Special Forces soldier was staring at her. Their faces were a gallery of shock, disbelief, and utter confusion. They had just watched the clumsy, incompetent Nurse Sharma take control of a situation that had bested a senior surgeon and a team of military professionals. They had watched her do it not with force or medicine, but with words. Words that made no sense. Red falcon. Ghost bird. The sky is clear. Dr. Finch stood a few feet away, the syringe of Haldol still in his hand. His mouth was slightly open. The color had drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of astonishment. His authority, so absolute just moments before, had not just been challenged. It had been completely and utterly obliterated. He looked from the now calm Admiral to the small, unassuming nurse who stood beside him. He looked at her posture, which was no longer hunched and apologetic, but perfectly straight, balanced, and ready. He looked at her eyes, which were not downcast but clear, steady, and assessing him with an unnerving analytical calm. He was not looking at Nurse Sharma. He had no idea who he was looking at. The Major was the first to break the silence. He took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving Anya. He had heard the codes. He didn't know them, but he knew the cadence. He knew the sound of command when he heard it. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Anya's mask slammed back into place. The transformation was just as shocking as the first one. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes dropped to the floor. The warrior vanished, and the meek nurse returned. I'm nobody," she stammered, her voice trembling again. I heard him shouting those names. I must have read them in his chart or something. I just repeated them. I thought it might calm him down. I got lucky." It was the weakest lie she had ever told. It was transparently, absurdly false. And everyone in the room knew it. Finch finally found his voice. "Lucky?" he sputtered, his face a mess of conflicting emotions. "You got lucky? Admiral Thorne was about to tear this ER apart. He assaulted a nurse, and you whispered gibberish in his ear, and he just stopped." "I don't know," Anya said, shrinking back. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." She was retreating, trying desperately to crawl back into the shell of her cover, but the shell was cracked. The damage was done. The Major ignored her. He was staring at the Admiral, who was now breathing evenly, his eyes closed. He looked back at Anya, his gaze sharp and penetrating. There was nothing in his field chart about a ghost bird or a red falcon. Those weren't names. They were call signs. Elena Petrova, the older nurse, stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on the arm of the nurse who had been hit. She looked at Anya, and for the first time, there was no pity in her eyes. There was awe, and a dawning, terrifying understanding. "Let's give them some space," Elena said to the other staff, her voice firm. She began herding the stunned onlookers out of the trauma bay, creating a bubble of isolation around Anya, Finch, and the soldiers. The questions started, a barrage from two fronts. "What did you say to him?" "Exactly what did you say?" Finch demanded, stepping closer. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate need for an explanation that would restore his sense of order. "How did you know those words would work?" Simultaneously, the Major pressed his own inquiry, his tone less hysterical but far more menacing. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to identify yourself, your real identity. That was a decommissioned communications protocol. Access to that is above top secret. You have some explaining to do." Anya felt trapped. The walls were closing in again. She had broken the first rule of her new life: never be noticed. Now, she was the center of a storm. "I told you I don't know," she insisted, her voice small and tight. "I just guessed. Please, I have to go check on my other patients." She tried to sidle past them, to escape the suffocating intensity of their stares. The Major put a hand on her arm. It was not violent, but it was immovable. "You're not going anywhere." The contact, the physical assertion of control, sent a jolt through her. A flicker of the old rage, the cornered animal, sparked in her eyes. For a fraction of a second, the Major saw it. He saw the woman who had faced down the Admiral's delirium, and he instinctively took a half-step back, his hand dropping from her arm. He had seen that look before. He had seen it in the eyes of operators about to do something lethal. The moment was broken by a sudden, frantic beeping. Everyone's head snapped toward the cardiac monitor hooked up to the Admiral. A flat line, a single, piercing tone. "He's in V-fib crashing," a nurse shouted from the corner. Finch stared, frozen for a critical second. The calm, controlled patient had suddenly become a dying one. His mind, still reeling from the impossible thing he had just witnessed, was slow to react. "Get the crash cart," he finally yelled, shaking himself out of his stupor. "Charge the paddles to 200. This was a new crisis, a different kind of chaos, a medical one. This was Finch's territory. He shoved past Anya, taking charge once more. "I need someone on compressions. Get me an airway tray." Anya saw her chance, a chance to fade back into the wallpaper, a chance to let them forget. But as she watched, she saw the errors. The chaos was inefficient. A junior resident fumbled with the defibrillator paddles. Finch was shouting orders, but they were overlapping, confused. They were losing time. The Admiral's brain was being starved of oxygen. Every second that ticked by was a second closer to irreversible damage, or death. Her training screamed at her, not the nursing school training, the other training. The Tier 1 combat medic course she had been forced to take, the one that taught you how to run a trauma code in the back of a bouncing Humvee with mortars landing all around you. Finch grabbed the paddles. "Clear," he shouted. The Admiral's body jumped. The monitor blipped, then returned to the frantic, useless squiggles of ventricular fibrillation. No change. "No. Charge to 300. "Wrong," Anya's mind supplied automatically. "The chest wound. It's a possible tension pneumothorax. The pressure in his chest cavity is preventing the heart from refilling properly. Shocking him is useless until you relieve the pressure." She saw it so clearly. The slight distension of the veins in his neck, the subtle asymmetrical movement of his chest when the resident was attempting compressions. The signs were all there. Small details. The kind of details everyone else was missing in the panic. Finch was preparing to shock him again, wasting precious time, killing him. She couldn't let that happen. Not him, not Thorne. He had been there. He had pulled her, or what was left of her, out of the fire. She owed him. This time the decision was conscious. It was cold and deliberate. Her cover was a casualty of war. The mission was to save the asset. She moved. "Stop." The word was quiet, but it had the force of a thunderclap. It was the voice of command again. Absolute. Unquestionable. Finch paused, paddles held aloft, and glared at her. "Sharma, get the hell out of my trauma bay. That is a direct order." Anya ignored him. She walked to a nearby supply cart, and her hands moved with a blur of speed. She grabbed a 14-gauge IV catheter and a betadine swab. She turned back to the gurney. "It's a tension pneumothorax," she said, her voice completely flat, devoid of any of the hesitation or fear she had feigned for months. It was the voice of a diagnostician, a professional. "You're shocking a heart that can't fill. You're wasting time." Finch's face went from angry to incredulous. "A tension? What are you talking about? You're a nurse. You don't make diagnoses." Anya didn't answer. She was already at Thorne's side, tearing open his uniform. She swabbed a spot on his chest, in the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Her movements were brutally efficient. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. "What do you think you're doing?" Finch bellowed, starting toward her. The major put a hand on Finch's chest, stopping him cold. The soldier's eyes were locked on Anya, a look of stunning realization on his face. He recognized this kind of movement. This was not a nurse. This was a medic, a high-speed battlefield medic. Anya held the large-bore needle poised over the Admiral's chest. She looked directly at Finch, and for the first time, she let him see. She let him see the cold, hard certainty in her eyes, the eyes of someone who had done this 100 times before, not in a sterile room, but in the dirt and the blood. "He has about 30 seconds of viable brain function left, Doctor," she said, her voice like ice. "Are you going to let your ego be the thing that kills him?" Finch stared, speechless. The entire room held its breath. Anya didn't wait for an answer. She drove the needle into the Admiral's chest. There was a sickening pop as it punctured the pleura, followed by a distinct hiss of escaping air. It was the sound of a life being saved. On the monitor, the chaotic V-fib pattern instantly converted. A single, beautiful, normal sinus rhythm blipped across the screen. Beep, beep, beep. The steady, rhythmic sound of a beating heart. Anya pulled the needle out, leaving the catheter in place as a makeshift valve. She stepped back from the gurney, her face impassive. She had just performed a needle decompression, a risky, invasive procedure usually reserved for trauma surgeons or paramedics in the most extreme circumstances. And she had done it perfectly. The silence that followed was even more profound than the first time. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. Finch looked from the healthy rhythm on the monitor to the catheter sticking out of the Admiral's chest, to the nurse who stood there as if she had just done nothing more complicated than fluff a pillow. He was a senior attending surgeon, a man at the top of his field. And a nurse he had belittled and mocked for months, had just saved his patient's life in front of his entire team. She hadn't just been right, she had been faster, calmer, and more competent than he was. The humiliation was absolute. It was a professional annihilation. Then, a new voice joined the tableau, a weak, raspy whisper from the gurney. "Knew you'd have my back, Ghost Bird," Admiral Thorne mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. He wasn't looking at the doctor who had tried to shock him back to life. He was looking at Anya. The name hung in the air. Ghost Bird. Spoken again. This time, not in a delirious rage, but in a moment of lucid gratitude. It was a confirmation, a validation. The Major took a sharp breath. His eyes widened and a look of something like religious awe crossed his face. He knew that call sign. Not personally, but he knew the legend. Everyone in the Special Operations community knew the legend of Ghost Bird, the commander of Task Force Spectre, the operator who had held the Zagram Pass against impossible odds, the one who had been declared killed in action 5 years ago, her name etched onto a classified memorial wall at Fort Bragg. He was staring at a ghost. He looked at Anya, at her small frame and her messy bun, and tried to reconcile the image with the mythical figure from the stories. It was impossible. And yet, it was true. Anya knew it was over. The last piece of her cover had just been vaporized by the very man she had saved. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, a silent farewell to the quiet, anonymous life she had tried so hard to build. When she opened them, the fear was gone. The meekness was gone. Anya Sharma, the clumsy nurse, had left the building. In her place stood an operator whose cover was blown. The questions came, but they were different now. The tone had shifted from suspicion to reverence. The Major approached her slowly, as one might approach an unexploded bomb. "You're Ghost Bird?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Anya gave a single sharp nod. The admission felt like a surrender. Dr. Finch simply stared, his mind struggling to process the cascade of impossible events. The nurse he had called a liability was a war hero, a legend. The sheer, staggering cognitive dissonance left him mute. He felt his world tilting on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about strength, competence, and authority had been wrong. Elena Petrova stood in the doorway, a stack of towels in her hands, her face pale. She had seen the needle decompression. She knew what it meant. She looked at Anya and then at the humbled doctor, and a slow, sad smile touched her lips. Before anyone could say another word, a new figure appeared. A woman in a crisp, dark business suit walked into the trauma bay with an air of absolute authority. She was flanked by 2 men in identical suits, their jackets bulging in ways that suggested body armor and concealed weapons. Her eyes, the color of chips of ice, scanned the room and landed on Anya. There was no surprise in her gaze, only confirmation. "It is you," the woman said, her voice calm and clipped. "I was told, but I didn't believe it." Anya's body went rigid. She knew this woman. Colonel Eva Rostova, military intelligence, the woman who wrote the after-action reports, the woman who buried the bodies, both literal and figurative. "Eva," Anya said, her voice flat. It was the first time she had spoken a name from her past. Rostova's gaze flickered to the conscious admiral, then to the stunned medical staff, and finally to the Major, who had instinctively snapped to a position of parade rest. Major, secure the floor, Rostova commanded. No one in or out. Confiscate all phones. Everyone in this room is now under a national security directive. What you have seen and heard does not leave this hospital. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am, the major barked, his voice sharp with renewed purpose. He began issuing orders to his men, who moved with swift, silent efficiency to lock down the entire emergency department. Rostova turned her attention back to Anya. We need to talk, she said, in private. What happened to the Admiral was not an accident. Anya's stomach clenched. She knew, of course she knew. A man like Thorne didn't just get into a car crash. The soldiers, the helicopter, the urgency, it all pointed to something else. His convoy was hit, Rostova said, her voice dropping lower. IED followed by a complex ambush just outside the city. They were trying to kill him. Why? Anya asked, the old analytical part of her brain kicking back into high gear. Because of what he knows, Rostova replied, her eyes dark. And because of who he was about to testify against. They failed to kill him on the road, so now, she let her gaze drift around the hospital. They're going to come here to finish the job. The sterile, brightly lit trauma base suddenly felt like the most dangerous place on Earth. The hospital wasn't a sanctuary. It was the battlefield. Colonel Rostova led Anya into a small, windowless doctor's consultation room. It felt like every debriefing room Anya had ever been in, sterile, impersonal, designed for the delivery of hard truths. The two men in suits stood guard outside the door, effectively sealing them off from the rest of the world. Scrubbed records, a new identity, a nursing degree from a small college in Ohio, Rostova began, not even bothering to sit down. She paced the small room like a caged panther. We did a good job of burying you. How did you end up here? I wanted quiet, Anya said, her voice raspy. She leaned against the wall, the adrenaline from the code blue finally beginning to ebb, leaving a bone-deep weariness in its place. I thought this would be the last place anyone would look for me, a place to heal things, not break them. Rostova gave a short, bitter laugh. There are no quiet places for people like us, Anya. You should know that. She stopped pacing and fixed Anya with her piercing gaze. Thorne's convoy was hit by professionals, ex-military. They used a shaped charge, classic anti-vehicle ambush tactics. His security detail was good. They managed to extract him, but the attackers knew what they were doing. Who? Anya asked. The question was a reflex. Identify the enemy. We're not sure. A private military contractor, we think. A shell corporation called Aegis Tactical. Untraceable for the most part. But the man running it, Rostova hesitated, her jaw tightening. We believe it's Commander Valerius. The name hit Anya like a physical shock. Valerius. He had been her second-in-command in Task Force Spectre, a brilliant tactician, ruthless, ambitious, a man she had trusted with her life, the man who had been standing right next to her when the Zagrim Pass went to hell. Valerius is dead, Anya stated. It wasn't a question, it was a fact. He had been listed on the same casualty report as her. Like you were, Rostova corrected softly. He disappeared after the ambush. We thought he was captured or vaporized. Turns out he just went into business for himself. He took his skills and a few loyal men to the private sector. He sells war to the highest bidder. The betrayal was a cold, sharp thing in her chest. Valerius was alive, and he was a mercenary. The principles they had fought for, the sacrifices they had made, it all meant nothing to him. Wow, why Thorne? Anya pressed, her mind racing, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. What does the Admiral know? Zagrim Pass, Rostova said, and the room seemed to grow colder. Thorne was the flag officer who authorized the mission. For the past year, he's been conducting a quiet, off-the-books investigation into what really happened that day. He found something that points back to Valerius. What did he find? He found out the ambush wasn't a random insurgent attack, Rostova said, her voice low and grave. It was a setup. The intel that sent your team into that valley was deliberately falsified. You were sent there to be eliminated. The whole team. Anya felt the floor shift beneath her feet. The official story had been a catastrophic intelligence failure, a tragedy. But this was treason. Her team, her people, had been murdered, sacrificed. Why? She whispered, the word barely audible. Valerius was dirty. He was running a side operation, skimming weapons and selling them on the black market. Your team was getting too close to uncovering it. He used the ambush to wipe the slate clean, kill you, and fake his own death in the process. The scar on Anya's arm throbbed, a dull, aching pulse. She remembered the fire, the screaming, the sudden shocking betrayal as rounds came not just from the ridgeline in front, but from their flank, from a position that was supposed to have been secured by Valerius's men. It had never made sense. Until now. Thorn was going to present his findings to the Joint Chiefs tomorrow morning, Rostova concluded. Valerius couldn't let that happen. He tried to kill him on the road. He failed, which means he knows exactly where Thorn is right now, and he will come here to finish it. The hospital. A soft target, full of civilians. It was a tactical nightmare. "What's your asset situation?" Anya asked, her mind snapping back into mission mode. The grief and betrayal would have to wait. Survival came first. Rostova blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. She was no longer talking to a traumatized nurse. She was talking to Ghostbird. The Major and his 4-man fire team are all that's left of Thorn's security detail. They're good. Tier 2 operators, but they're not you, and they're not expecting a full-scale assault. And Valerius? He'll have a team of at least a dozen, all ex-special forces. They'll be equipped with suppressed weapons, night vision. They'll treat this like any other black site infiltration, fast, brutal, and silent. Anya began to pace, her mind a whirlwind of tactical calculations. The hospital's security is non-existent. A few guards with sidearms, half of them asleep. We have no hardened positions, no defensible choke points. The layout is a maze, easy for attackers to navigate with blueprints, impossible for us to defend completely. "My thoughts exactly," Rostova said. "I have a QRF inbound from the nearest base, but they're 30 minutes out, best case scenario. We have to hold this place for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, an eternity." Anya stopped pacing and looked at Rostova. "Get the Admiral moved. Top floor. Surgical ICU. It's the most defensible position. Limited access points. We can control the elevators and the stairwells." "Already in motion," Rostova confirmed. "I need a breakdown of the Major's team. Names, specialties, equipment." "They're waiting for you in the ICU. The Major's name is Pierce. He knows who you are now. He'll follow your lead." "And the hospital staff?" Anya asked. "Finch? The others?" "They're a liability," Rostova said coldly. "But we can't just make them disappear. We're keeping them isolated. Finch is with the Admiral. He's a good surgeon, whatever his personality flaws. We need him if Thorn's condition worsens." Anya nodded. It was a sound plan, a desperate one, but a plan nonetheless. She walked to the door. Her hand rested on the handle. 5 years she had run from this, 5 years of hiding, of pretending, and now the war had found her in a hospital corridor. There was a grim, terrible irony in it. "Anya," Rostova said, her voice softer now, "you don't have to do this. You're officially a civilian. I can have you extracted. No one would blame you." Anya looked back over her shoulder. The meek, frightened nurse was completely gone. In her eyes was a cold, hard fire that Rostova had not seen in years. It was the look of a commander accepting a mission from which he might not return. "Valerius killed my team," Anya said, her voice low and dangerous. "He's not just coming for the Admiral. He's coming to bury the last ghost of Zagram Pass. This isn't your fight, Ava. It's mine." She opened the door and walked out, leaving Rostova alone in the quiet, sterile room. The Huntress was awake, and she was on her own territory. The surgical ICU was a world away from the chaos of the ER. It was a place of hushed tones and the steady rhythm of machines. But tonight, it felt like a fortress under siege. Major Pierce and his 4-man team, call signs Reaper, Doc, Nomad, and Jester, were positioned by the main entrance. They were checking weapons, organizing magazines, and speaking in low, clipped tones. When Anya walked in, they all fell silent and turned to her. They were looking at a legend. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and uncertainty. They saw a small woman in oversized nurse's scrubs. They were trying to see the warrior from the stories. Anya didn't give them time to think. "Report!" she snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. Major Pierce stepped forward. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a grim, determined face. "Ma'am, team is operational. We have standard issue M4s, sidearms, limited explosives. Communications are on a secure channel. We've locked down the elevators. We have Jester watching the main stairwell access." Lay out, Anya commanded, her eyes already scanning the floor plan, memorizing every corner, every doorway. No. Single point of entry through these doors, Pierce reported, pointing. 2 fire escape stairwells at the east and west ends of the corridor. Windows are reinforced but not bulletproof. We're on the 12th floor. They'll likely come from the roof or an adjacent floor. They'll use the fire stairs, Anya said, thinking aloud. It's quieter than a roof insertion. They'll breach on this floor and the one below simultaneously to divide our attention. She turned to the hospital's head of security, a man named David Chen. He was a former Marine, and it showed in his posture. He looked completely out of his depth, but was holding it together. Chen, Anya said. Your people. How many and where? 12 guards on duty for the whole hospital, ma'am, Chen said, his voice tight. Mostly older guys. Only 6 are former military or police. They're armed with 9mm pistols. They're not equipped for this. I don't need them to fight, Anya said. I need them to watch. Get me eyes on every stairwell camera feed now. And I want every single access door to this floor barricaded. Use whatever you can find. Gurneys, supply carts, furniture from the waiting rooms. Make it noisy. I want to hear them coming. Chen nodded, a look of relief on his face at being given a clear, achievable task. He hurried off, speaking into his radio. Anya turned back to Pierce's team. Nomad, Doc, you're with me. We're setting up a final fallback position in the Admiral's room. Reaper, Jester, you're on overwatch at the main entrance. You see anything that's not a friendly, you light it up. No hesitation. Ma'am, Reaper asked, what are our rules of engagement? Anya met his gaze. Her eyes were like chips of flint. The ROE is Valerius, and his men are hostile combatants. You are cleared to engage and neutralize any and all threats to the asset. This is a free fire zone. The men nodded grimly. This they understood. Anya walked toward Admiral Thorne's room. Inside, she could see Dr. Finch working with a nurse, Elena Petrova, Anya noted with a flicker of surprise, stabilizing the Admiral for the fight to come. As she approached, Finch came out. He looked pale and shaken. He stopped in front of Anya, blocking her path. He started, his voice cracking. He couldn't seem to find the words. He looked at the floor, then back at her. I am sorry, he finally managed to say, for everything. I was arrogant. I was a fool. What you did down there, who you are. Anya held up a hand, cutting him off. There was no time for apologies, no time for sentiment. Can you use a gun, Doctor? She asked, her tone flat and businesslike. Finch looked startled. What? No, I'm a surgeon. I save lives. Tonight, the best way to save lives is to be prepared to take them, Anya said, her voice hard. But if you can't shoot, you can still help. The Admiral, what's his status? Finch snapped back into professional mode, grateful to be on familiar ground. He's stable for now. The pneumothorax is resolved. I've put in a proper chest tube, but he's weak. Any significant stress could send him into cardiac arrest again. Then keep him alive, Anya ordered. Elena, she called past him. The older nurse looked up. Barricade that door behind me, and find me anything sharp and metallic. Elena just nodded, her face grim but resolute. She had seen war before. She recognized its prelude. Anya entered the room. Admiral Thorne was conscious, his eyes following her. He looked old and frail against the white hospital sheets. Ghostbird, he rasped. Valerius? He's coming, Anya confirmed, but he's not getting to you, I promise. It was my fault, Thorne whispered, his eyes filling with tears. I sent you into that trap. I should have seen it. The intel was too perfect. It wasn't your fault, Anya said, her voice softening for the first time. It was his, and tonight, we settle the debt. She turned away and began assessing the room. It was a standard private ICU room. A large window looked out into the night. A single door. Medical equipment. She started moving things, her mind working, turning a sick room into a kill box. She pulled the heavy bed away from the wall, angling it to provide cover. She directed Nomad and Doc to move cabinets, creating a makeshift barricade. Elena returned with a stainless steel IV pole and a surgical tray full of scalpels. Anya took the heavy pole, testing its weight. A decent improvised weapon. Then, Chen's voice crackled over the radio she had taken from Pierce. Ma'am, I've got movement. Stairwell C, level 10. Multiple hostiles. They're moving fast. Black gear. Suppressed weapons. Anya keyed the mic. All stations, this is Ghostbird. Stand by to engage. They're coming. The quiet of the ICU was shattered. The battle for St. Jude's Hospital had begun. The first sound was a soft thump from 2 floors below, the sound of a suppressed shotgun breaching a door, then another, closer. They were on the 11th floor now. Chen's frantic voice on the radio confirmed it. They're on 11. They've bypassed the barricade, moving toward the stairs to your level. Reaper, Jester, hold the main entrance, Anya commanded into her radio, her voice a low, steady anchor in the rising storm of panic. They'll feint there to draw your fire. The real push will come from the fire escapes. Nomad, west stairs, Dock, east. Sound off on contact. The 2 soldiers melted into positions on either side of the ICU's central corridor, their rifles pointed at the heavy metal doors of the fire escapes. The silence stretched, taut, and agonizing. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the Admiral's heart monitor, a fragile metronome counting down their final seconds of peace. Then, the western stairwell door exploded inward. It wasn't a breach charge. It was a sledgehammer, swung with brutal, efficient force. 3 blows, and the lock shattered. 3 figures, clad in black from head to toe, spilled into the hallway. "Contact west!" Nomad yelled, his M4 erupting in a controlled 3-round burst. The hallway became a whirlwind of noise and violence. The attackers returned fire, their suppressed weapons making sharp coughing sounds that were somehow more terrifying than a full-throated roar. Plaster dust filled the air as bullets chewed into the walls. Simultaneously, the eastern door was breached. "Contact east!" Doc shouted, his own weapon adding to the cacophony. They were caught in a classic pincer movement. Valerius was executing a textbook assault. Anya watched from the doorway of the Admiral's room, her mind processing the firefight with chilling detachment. Her men were good, but they were outnumbered, pinned down. "Reaper, Jester, suppress the main entrance. Don't let them link up," she ordered. From the end of the hall, 2 more rifles opened up, their unslant's cracks echoing like thunder. Reaper and Jester were holding the center, preventing the 2 attacking groups from converging. But it was a losing battle. They were being squeezed. Anya saw one of Valerius's men toss a flashbang. "Grenade!" she screamed. Nomad, caught in the open, was too slow. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening bang. He staggered back, disoriented, clutching his head. An attacker stepped out, rifle raised for the kill shot. Anya moved. She didn't have a rifle. She had the IV pole. She burst from the Admiral's room, a 5-foot-4-inch whirlwind of green scrubs and focused rage. She covered the 20 feet to Nomad's position in less than 2 seconds. The attacker, his attention on the stunned soldier, never saw her coming. She swung the heavy steel pole like a baseball bat, putting every ounce of her strength into it. The pole connected with the side of the man's helmeted head with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. He dropped without a sound, his rifle clattering to the floor. Anya didn't pause. She scooped up the fallen rifle, an HK-416, its weight familiar and comforting in her hands. She checked the magazine, chambered a round, and brought it to her shoulder in one fluid motion. 2 more attackers were advancing on Nomad's position. Anya dropped to one knee, using an overturned gurney for cover. She acquired her target, squeezed the trigger, double tap, one in the chest, one in the head. The man crumpled. She shifted her aim. The second man, realizing the new threat, turned toward her. Too late. Another double tap. He fell back against the wall and slid to the floor, 3 down in less than 5 seconds. The firefight faltered. The attackers, who had been advancing with confidence, were suddenly hesitant. Their flank had been annihilated by a ghost in a nurse's uniform. "Nomad, you good?" Anya yelled over the ringing in her ears. "Ears are ringing, but I'm good," he shouted back, shaking his head to clear it. He looked at the 3 bodies near him, then at Anya, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Fall back to the Admiral's room, now," she commanded. "Doc, you too. We're collapsing the perimeter." The soldiers obeyed instantly, laying down covering fire as they retreated down the hall. Anya provided overwatch, her stolen rifle spitting fire with deadly accuracy, forcing the remaining attackers to stay behind cover. They all piled into the Admiral's room, followed by Reaper and Jester. They slammed the heavy door shut and shoved a medical supply cabinet in front of it. The room was now a besieged bunker. Anya, Pierce, and the 4 soldiers. Elena and Dr. Finch huddled over the Admiral, who was watching the scene with wide, terrified eyes. Status report, Anya barked, reloading her new rifle. We're boxed in, Pierce said grimly. They control the corridor. We're out of options. We always have options, Anya countered, her eyes scanning the room. They landed on the large window. They think we're trapped. They're going to stack on that door and breach. They're expecting us to make our last stand here. And we're not? Jester asked, his voice strained. No, Anya said. We're going to do something they don't expect. She looked at Finch. The oxygen tanks. How many are in here? Finch looked confused. 2 large ones. Why? Are they full? Yes, standard procedure. A plan, desperate and insane, formed in Anya's mind. Doc, you're a combat medic. You still have your kit? Yes, ma'am. Give me your C4, she said. Doc's eyes widened, but he didn't question her. He pulled a small block of plastic explosive from his pack and handed it over, along with a detonator. Anya turned to the others. We're not waiting for them to breach. We're breaching out. She pointed at the wall adjoining the next room. That's just drywall. We're going through it. Pierce, get the Admiral ready to move. We're leapfrogging from room to room until we get to the West Fire escape. From outside the door, a new voice called out. It was amplified, metallic, and chillingly familiar. Ghostbird, I know you're in there. You can't run from me this time, Anya. I came back to finish the job. It was Valerius. Anya froze. The sound of his voice, twisted by a bullhorn, sent a sliver of ice through her veins. It's over, Valerius shouted. Throw the Admiral out. I'll let you and the nurses live. My fight isn't with you anymore. It's just business. Anya walked to the door. You're a liar, Valerius, she yelled back, her voice raw. You were always a liar. You killed our men for money. There was a pause. Then a cold, humorless chuckle. Survival of the fittest, Anya. You taught me that. Now, last chance. Send out the old man. Anya looked at Pierce and his men. She saw the grim determination in their eyes. They weren't giving up. She turned her attention back to the wall. She placed the small C4 charge, molding it carefully. She rigged the detonator. Get down, she yelled. She pressed the button. The explosion was contained but violent, ripping a jagged hole through the drywall into the adjacent hospital room. Dust and debris filled the air. Go, go, go! Anya screamed. Pierce and Nomad lifted the Admiral, mattress and all, and hauled him through the hole. The others followed, providing cover. On the other side of the door, Valerius's team, stunned by the unexpected explosion, began firing wildly. Bullets tore through the barricaded door, shredding the metal cabinet. Anya was the last one through the breach. As she scrambled through, she looked back. She saw the 2 large oxygen tanks. An idea sparked, a terrible, brilliant idea. She pulled the pin on a fragmentation grenade she'd taken from one of the dead soldiers. Elena, scalpel, she yelled. The nurse, her face pale with terror but her hands steady, threw her one. Anya caught it. In one swift, brutal motion, she slashed the hoses on both oxygen tanks. The room began to fill with pure, pressurized oxygen. Fire in the hole, she screamed, rolling the grenade back into the Admiral's now empty room. She dove through the breach in the wall as Valerius's men finally kicked down the door. The grenade's explosion in a room saturated with pure oxygen was not a normal detonation. It was a fuel-air bomb. A catastrophic blast erupted from the room, blowing the door and the breaching team back down the hallway in a wave of fire and shrapnel. The entire floor shook. Anya and her team were already moving, crashing through the next room, then the next, a human battering ram making their own path through the hospital. Behind them, screams and the roar of fire. They reached the west stairwell. It was clear. They began their descent, carrying the Admiral, a strange, desperate procession moving down through the heart of the besieged hospital. They were alive. They were out of the kill box, but the hunt was far from over. Valerius was still out there, and now he was furious. They reached the ground floor lobby. It was a scene of carnage. Valerius's men had been ruthless. 2 of Chen's security guards lay dead near the entrance. The glass doors were shattered. They've created a choke point at the main entrance, Pierce said, peering around a large potted plant. They're waiting for us to try and run for it. QRF is 2 minutes out, Anya said, checking her watch. We just need to hold on. Just then, Dr. Finch, who had been helping Elena monitor the Admiral, looked up. His face was ashen. He's fading. The stress. His heart can't take it. I need a real operating room. I need equipment or he's going to die right here. Anya looked at the dying admiral, then at the entrance where Valerius and his remaining men were undoubtedly regrouping. It was an impossible choice. Stay and fight, and the admiral dies. Make a run for it, and they all get cut down in the open. Then she saw him, Valerius. He stepped through the shattered main doors, standing silhouetted against the flashing emergency lights from outside. He held a rifle in one hand and a detonator in the other. "It's over, Anya!" he yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. "I've wired the main hospital gas lines. I'll bring the whole building down if I have to. Just give me Thorn." He was bluffing. Or was he? Anya couldn't take that chance. She handed her rifle to Pierce. "Cover me," she said. "What are you doing?" Pierce demanded. "Ending this," she said. She stepped out from behind the cover, her hands raised. She was unarmed. Valerius smiled, a predator's grin. "Finally came to your senses." "It's me you want, Valerius," Anya said, walking slowly toward him. "It was always me. Let the others go. You and I can settle this." "Tempting," Valerius said. "But the Admiral is the loose end. You're just the ghost story they tell about him." He raised his rifle. Anya kept walking, her eyes locked on his. She was closing the distance. 20 feet, 15. "You were a good soldier, Anya," Valerius said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "But you were never a killer. Not like me." 10 feet. From the corner of his eye, Valerius saw a flicker of movement. He turned his head for a fraction of a second. It was Dr. Finch, making a desperate, foolish run from behind a column, a scalpel clutched in his hand like a dagger. It was the opening Anya needed. In that split second of distraction, she lunged. She moved with a speed that was inhuman. She wasn't aiming for the gun, she was aiming for him. She slammed her shoulder into his chest, driving him backward. Her hand shot out and grabbed the detonator from his grasp. They crashed to the floor together. Valerius was bigger, stronger. He rolled on top of her, his hands going for her throat. "I should have killed you in the pass," he snarled, his face inches from hers. Anya drove her knee into his groin. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a second. It was enough. She brought her hands up, the thumbs driving hard into the pressure points below his jaw. He screamed, a high, thin sound. His rifle was on the floor between them. They both scrambled for it. Anya was faster. She grabbed the barrel and swung it, the stock cracking against the side of his head. He fell back, dazed. She got to her feet, leveling the rifle at him. It was over. Outside, the sound of sirens grew to a deafening roar. The QRF had arrived. Valerius lay on the floor, bleeding, defeated. He looked up at her, a sneer on his face. "Go on," he spat. "Finish it. Be the killer you always pretended you weren't." Anya looked down at the man who had been her brother in arms, the man who had murdered her team. The rage was a fire in her veins. Her finger was tight on the trigger. Then she looked past him. She saw Dr. Finch, standing over the Admiral, desperately trying to keep him alive. She saw Elena pressing bandages to a wound on Jester's arm. She saw Pierce and his men forming a protective circle. Healers, protectors. She was not like Valerius. She was not a murderer. She was a soldier. She lowered the rifle. "No," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You're going to stand trial. You're going to answer for what you did. That's a fate worse than death for a man like you." As heavily armed soldiers swarmed into the lobby, taking Valerius and his remaining men into custody, Anya walked back to the group. She knelt beside Admiral Thorn. Finch looked up at her, his hands covered in blood. "He's gone into arrest again. I can't hold him." Anya put her hand on the Admiral's chest. "It's over, Marcus," she whispered. "We got him. You can rest now." The steady tone of the flatline filled the lobby. In the quiet aftermath, the hospital lobby resembled a war zone. Medical teams were tending to the wounded. Federal agents were processing the scene. Anya sat on the edge of a planter, the stolen rifle resting across her knees. She felt hollow, empty. Colonel Rostova found her there. She sat down next to Anya, saying nothing for a long time. Thorn's last act was to upload his entire investigation to a secure server, Rostova finally said. "Valerius, his employers, they're all going down. His death won't be in vain." Anya just nodded, staring at the shattered glass on the floor. "They're calling you a hero," Rostova continued. The official story will be a terrorist attack, thwarted by a visiting military consultant who just happened to be on site. Your cover is gone, but your legend is secure. I'm not a hero, Anya said, her voice flat. I'm a nurse who failed to save her patient. You were a soldier who saved everyone else. From across the lobby, Dr. Finch approached them. He looked exhausted, defeated, and profoundly changed. He stopped in front of Anya, not as a superior, but as a supplicant. The hospital board has been informed, he said, his voice quiet and formal. They know what you did. We all do. What you did tonight, it was... He struggled for the word. Magnificent. I've never seen anything like it. I spent months treating you like you were nothing. I was wrong. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. Anya finally looked up at him. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. You were part of my cover, Doctor, she said, a hint of a sad smile on her lips. You played your part perfectly. The compliment seemed to wound him more than any insult could have. He simply nodded, humbled, and walked away. Rostova stood up. The Secretary of Defense wants to see you. There's talk of a new position. They want to reactivate you, not in the field, something else. They want you to teach, to head up training at the farm, to create the next generation of operators like you. Anya looked down at her hands. The hands of a nurse, the hands of a soldier. For 5 years she had tried to keep them separate. She had tried to be one or the other, but tonight had taught her she was both. She couldn't escape the warrior, but she didn't have to abandon the healer. An instructor? She asked. The best, Rostova confirmed. You can pass on what you know, not just how to fight, but why. You can teach them how to come home, how to survive the peace as well as the war. Survive the peace. That was what she had been trying to do all this time. Hiding wasn't surviving. It was just a slow death. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to integrate, to be whole again. She looked at Rostova, and for the first time in 5 years, her eyes were clear. The storm was gone. Okay, she said. 6 months later. The sun beat down on a dusty training ground in the Virginia countryside. A group of young, eager candidates, the best and brightest from every branch of special operations, stood at attention. In front of them stood a woman. She was small in stature, dressed in simple training fatigues. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat, severe bun. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sky, missed nothing. The scar on her forearm was a pale silver line against her tanned skin. She paced before them, her movements economical and precise. Her voice when she spoke was not loud, but it carried an authority that commanded absolute silence and respect. My name is Anya Sharma, she said. Some of you may have heard stories about me. Most of them are exaggerated. What you need to know is this. I am here to teach you how to survive, not just the enemy's bullets, but your own ghosts. The first lesson is this. The most important weapon you will ever carry is not your rifle. It is the discipline inside your own mind. Control it, and you will control the battlefield. Lose it. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces of the future legends of their generation. And the war will follow you home forever. She turned and walked toward the firing range, her back straight, her stride confident. She was not Nurse Sharma. She was not Ghostbird. She was both. She was home.